that's the route which I've always taken, which is kind of right. Do you want to do that? Yes, you do. Right. You have to learn it at some point. These opportunities are not going to come around again. So we'll just say yes.
Mm.
And that is again exactly the same as how deep fusion films came about. In truth,
Yeah.
um, that approach to working is exactly how deep fusion happened. And again, the very, very accidental way that I became the trusted face of AI within media in 22, 23, which was off the back of uh, Gerry Anderson, A Life Uncharted, where we suddenly decided we would put a deep fake in Gerry Anderson, A Life Uncharted. We were contractually obliged to do it after we suggested we could, but in truth, not one of us had a clue how to make a deepfake.
Well,
So
let's
we,
yeah, let's get into that, because that's obviously, we're talking pretty much present day. You are the CEO, co-founder of Deep Fusion Films. As I mentioned at the beginning, there is a very strong focus on the ethical use of AI, and you've developed policies around that and published them. And just how I mean, you hinted at slightly how it started, but how do the two go together, from a sort of creative film production company, and then AI, and being sort of almost an expert? Well, you probably are an expert in AI policy. They don't
yeah.
seem naturally to go together. How did that come about?
No, you're right. They don't necessarily seem natural bedfellows, do they? Especially given how much sort of furor there is around AI and media generally, and certainly AI and creativity and the difficult relationship between them. Okay, so what happened is so I was working at a company called the Format Factory, who were I worked for a number of years, and one of the productions we were pitching was one called Gerry Anderson: A Life Uncharted, and this was about the Thunderbirds pioneer, Gerry Anderson. And Jamie, one of his sons, um, said that there was an untapped audio archive of something like 36 hours of unheard audio, um, of Gerry talking to his biographers, and it was deeply personal and it had never been explored before. And so we said, yeah, it seems like the absolute perfect basis for a documentary. It's wonderful. And then we said, okay, so what archive are we going to cover this with? And Jamie said, well, I don't really have any, or certainly not enough that was going to be able to cover the doc. And so we said, oh, that's going to be a challenge. And so let's imagine that we have this conversation on the Friday. On the Monday morning, the deepfake Tom Cruise thing came out on TikTok. And Monday afternoon, I rang Jamie and said, "Hey, Jamie, how do you fancy resurrecting your dead dad?" And that was pretty much verbatim, because these conversations are going to be awkward, so why not break them up with some low-level humor? Um, and Jamie responded very positively to it. He said, "Well, do you know how to do it?" I said, "No, but how hard can it be?" Um, it turns out very hard. We actually weren't. So we went into pre-production in April. We ran some tests in April, and we worked. It wasn't until the end of October before we had a working deepfake that actually was able to actually fool Gerry's daughter, Linda,
Wow.
to thinking that it was footage that actually existed,
Wow.
that was never seen before. And we didn't intentionally fool her, just to say that. I mean, I did say, before presenting her with a 1 minute clip of Gerry talking, Gerry in inverted commas,
Mhm.
I said, look, this is not your dad. This is not an interview he ever gave on camera. It is his voice, but it's not the visuals. And she watched it, and there was a pause, and she went, "So when did Dad film that?" So even though she was told it was not, she couldn't believe it wasn't.
Wow.
Um, so that was the time that we kind of went, okay, we've got this right. And then of course we have to deal with the presentation. So Gerry Gerry was a genius in many, many ways. Um, but one of the things that he was probably best at was falling out with people. He was incredibly good at falling out with people, be that a personal relationship or a business relationship. He would find a way to ruin it. And I'm being perhaps a little bit glib, but it is, it is broadly true. Um, And so what we realized was the fact that the documentary was placing Gerry in quite a positive light, and that a lot of people would not necessarily sort of align with the way that he was being presented in some ways, even though they were all his own words. And so what we needed to make sure was that people who were watching, once they knew that there was AI involved, there would be the opportunity for people to say, Jamie's making a documentary about his dad. He comes out really well. It's all with AI. It's all a load of rubbish. They've just twisted things to make him be positive. Make him be seen in a positive light. And so we said, this is really ropey. We need to absolutely make sure that we write a framework that allows for this for this documentary to exist, and for people to not be able to criticize the production techniques. So we wrote an ethical framework for things we would and wouldn't do, and that involved the audio quality of the tapes was really ropey, and we got in touch with a company called Respeecher. Respeecher have now won plenty of Emmys, but at the time, and I think they've even won an Oscar now. But at the time, nobody had really heard of Respeecher. They were just the only company we could find who were capable of recreating the voice of somebody, and making it, authentic, or as authentic as possible. We thought, right, so we could recreate the voice, and so therefore clean the tapes up that way. This was before Adobe Podcast was a thing, and Adobe Podcast would have been able to clean these tapes up no end. But we didn't have that option, so we would have only been able to, recreate them. And we said, no, you know what, the pauses, they're all really important. They're integral. There's as much said in a pause as there is in a line. So if we get the intonation wrong or something, it changes the meaning. No, we need to be transparent. So rather than change the audio, we created the visuals. So all of the segments with Gerry talking are all placed in TVs, so that we contextualize the crap audio, rather than recreate or try and clean up the audio. And we ran processes like that in order to make sure that the audience could trust what they were seeing, or hearing. And we ran title cards at the top, so that everybody could understand that some of the visuals were AI generated, but all of the audio was authentic. So we placed these sort of frameworks in. And when the film came out, it was universally accepted that it was a really great use of AI. Russell T Davies dropped me a message on Instagram. I didn't know Russell at the time. Still can't claim to know him very well now, but I know him better than not at all. It said, the use of deepfake was inspired. It absolutely changes what documentary can do, and so on. And pretty quickly after that, I became, the face of AI for BBC. So every time there was an AI story, so Deepfake Neighbor Wars came out on ITV X. So BBC had me on all the time talking about the ethics of AI, the SAG-AFTRA strikes. Yeah, they rolled me out again. I was on BBC Radio. I was all over the place. And then that is when, and because I was the only known face at that point, or one of the only known faces, that meant that all the policy writers sort of said, well, actually, you seem to know what you're talking about. Can you come in and help write our policy? And policy then turned into, okay, can you advise on some legislation? Can you advise on copyright? Can you advise on this? And so over the last 5 years, very accidentally and very incrementally, my knowledge base within this area has escalated. We set up Deep Fusion to take advantage of the fact that AI was coming, and that if we had written the policies and were largely trusted as being, the ethical faces of AI, then when the production capabilities came round, we would be in the perfect place to be at the forefront of that.